Retirement's a word and a concept that I've been hearing a lot lately. My age, my cohort, kind of the national political conversation around Social Security kind of has demanded that I think a lot about it. And I'm thinking about it on a personal level, but also about others, women I meet in the office, all my friends who are transitioning into this age, if you will. And I'm wondering, what does retirement look like for you, for all of you listening? Will you retire voluntarily? Will it be involuntarily due to health issues? Or is there a kind of a regulatory retirement or retirement age at the place of your work? And do you see retirement as an opportunity for more relaxation and time for yourself? Or does it create a lot of anxiety? Does it create worry about finances and the impact on, both your physical and mental health? So I wanted to look at studies to figure out whether someone's really figured this out. And upon kind of review of multiple studies looking at what happens with physical and mental health after retirement, conclusions are not conclusive. So much of it depends upon the type of work one does, if one retires again voluntarily or not, the state of one's health prior to retirement, and if you have a retirement account or a guaranteed pension or not. And then there's also the thing called cost of living and how that changes over time and impacts your day to day. So welcome to Gyno Curious. I'm your host and creator, Dr. Amy Novett. From both sides of the speculum, we're here to investigate what it means to be a healer and to be healed. Please let us know your thoughts and comments and send them to comments@radiofreerhinecliffe.com. And if you'd like to learn about my private practice, please go to dramynovett.com so you can learn about my both virtual and in-office work that's new for me and hopefully could provide some answers for you. So I've had the pleasure of speaking with Vicki Hack on a prior episode. Vicki is a graduate of Marymount College with a BS in finance and economics. For decades, she helped folks with financial matters as a financial advisor. Recently retired, Vicki is here to speak about the impact of transitioning from a full-time work to a retiree and how that's affected her overall health, mental, physical, and what she's observed in her clients over the course of her career as they moved into retirement as well. Vicki is not an expert in retirement statistics, and she has not studied the impact of retirement on health per se, but she's here to discuss her own personal journey with leaving work after many years of doing it, and also what she's observed in other women as they've moved into this rather large life transition. I also don't want to ignore how much privilege and wealth allows folks to voluntarily retire and how this is different from those who involuntarily leave their long-standing work. Also, I don't want to ignore that those listening in other countries other than the US might have very different pressures or privileges, since so many other countries have stronger government-backed pension systems and or mandatory retirement ages. Vicki, welcome back to the studio.
Thank you for having me again.
I'm so happy to see you. It's funny, our paths have crossed in many different ways over the many years that we both lived in Rhinebeck. And I feel particularly grateful to have you in the studio. You're one of those persons I kind of saw afar at the grocery store, across the street, whatever. And I always said to myself, I like that person. And so it's so nice that you're here today on this unbelievably beautiful summer day. Mm-hmm. We were just talking about how it was, I think it went down to the 50s in the middle of the night, and it was just, you needed a blanket, and it was just perfect. Mm-hmm. So if you would just remind listeners who haven't listened to our prior conversation on Gyno Curious, just about your work as a financial advisor, kind of how long you did it and what age you retired and when that was.
So I started my practice about 30 years ago, say 32, 33 years ago, as a wealth manager and a financial advisor. And while we didn't lean into primarily working with women, it was clear that it was impactful in the sense that there was a gap in women helping women with regard to financial services. So that really propelled my practice and helped me to identify the way I wanted to help women, help everybody, but it kind of led my career in a very fulfilling direction.
Great. Great.
So in 2023, I handed over my practice to a younger woman, yay, and had a lot of faith in her. While officially I retired in June of 2023, I had the good fortune to sit with her and introduce all of my clients, the majority of my clients from June to December.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And then on December 28th, she looked at me and she said, "Don't come back next year." So, like there's the ego, there was a little twinge with regard to that. And, I'd have to say that January 24 was when my retirement journey started. And I had almost a few epiphanies about how I had planned for that part of my retirement and reflected on the relationships that I had working for close to 30 years with some of my clients, helping them see that light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. May I ask how old you were when you decided to retire?
Yeah. I was 66.
Okay. So a little bit,
66.
Just 1 year past, kind of 65 seems to be kind of the typical retirement age, or at one time it was. And it was a voluntary retirement for yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I would imagine as a financially savvy person, there was a lot of thought that went into, how do I ensure that I have enough money to retire?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you already mentioned, ego and this big change. And, there's no question, I think you'd agree with me, retirement is a major life transition for those of us who've worked outside the home. And can you elaborate on that? How would you describe why it was a major life transition for you in particular?
Okay. We only have an hour.
Yeah.
So to roll it back a little bit, when I would sit with my clients and say, you can retire, I guess there's a commercial that says, you can do it. They would just look at me with this blank stare. And from a financial standpoint, I again, I had a fiduciary responsibility not to, candy coat something and have them selling pencils on the corner of East Market Street. So from a financial standpoint, I knew that I was set. What I will admit to you and your listeners is that while I definitely very pithily suggested in our last conversation that women own their financial selves, I frankly did not own my retirement self. Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, as a parody to the book, Who Moved My Cheese? My parody, my book, my story, a soul story was Who Moved My Wheel? Excuse me. So, frankly, since age 16, so let's just fast forward 50 years, which is hard to say, I had been on, a wheel. I was on a wheel in a cage and, was happily, merrily moving along, rolling that cage around. And then let's just say on January 1st, 2024, somebody moved my wheel. And frankly, I'm sure you can elaborate on this. From a physical, almost a DNA standpoint, my body was still on that wheel. But mentally, and, frankly, I am enjoying retirement, but mentally, I was not prepared.
Yeah.
I was just, the expectation of, well, I'm going to get everything done. I'm going to check everything off that list. The first year, last year, I did a lot of wonderful things. But from a mental health standpoint, there were a lot of challenges, a lot. From a physical standpoint, I'm probably in the best shape that I've been in a very, very long time, because that was one of my commitments to myself, to really get back into shape. However, that's a portion of your day.
Right.
Working out is a portion of your day.
Right.
Eating right is a philosophy, and, there are mechanisms for doing that too. But all of that quiet time, the time that had been spent getting into work at 7, preparing for meetings, engaging with people for 10 hours, thinking about them afterwards. That was sand through my hands. And it takes a lot to redefine who you are, especially, I would have to say, when you're an individual who kind of has an impact on other people's lives. Yeah. And you've engaged with people through thick and thin, through tears and laughter, through folks who chose to retire, and for those who didn't have an opportunity to choose it, but had it, handed to them. So
it's well put, because, I think that for anyone, this transition can be difficult. I would suspect it's a little easier for someone who might have done really hard physical work all their life. And there's that opportunity to say, I don't have to do that anymore. That must be, kind of a relief. And in a way, exploring better health because they're not doing such physical demanding work. On the other hand, as you described, so many of us spend our lives sitting at a desk. And so if you can spend that time in retirement moving the body, that has to enhance your well-being. But there's that emotional, mental, ego stuff, social relationship stuff that people don't talk about. So many of us, who we are is defined by what we do. And maybe it's particularly true for those of us who work so intimately with others, helping them. I have to think about that a little bit more, but there is something about contributing to other people's lives in the way that you did that's hard to step away from. Again, I imagine it gave you a sense of purpose.
That purpose, it was very gratifying.
Yeah.
With myself and my team, we couldn't fix everything, but if we couldn't fix it, because as I've confessed to, a driver and a fixer, that we did our darndest to help make it better for those individuals.
Yeah.
And, whether it was helping with retirement that was forced on them or whatever, there was a gratifying gratification of helping people and seeing for them to go down that path. So the fruition of making a plan and, seeing that little sparkle of, whatever it was going to resolve. And then, frankly, you're sitting at the dining room table counting stitches for a cow that you're knitting. And, and while there isn't, there's definitely gratification there, but the social aspect, not that I didn't look at my clients from a social standpoint. I was very clear about that. I liked my clients. Some clients I, just kind of knew I had an hour with them.
Right.
But it did fill a need of personal contact.
It's a type of relationship. It's a professional one, but it's still about being in a room, in a space with others. And the reason that Gyno Curious is talking about this today is because, as I've intimated when we spoke about money matters, when we live under chronic stress, this affects our health. It affects our mental health, our physical health. It exacerbates chronic health issues. And again, maybe because of my age and my pivoting, retirement, I've been asking myself a lot about it. And it's not a word that really speaks to me. And I've been asking myself, well, why don't you want to stop working? What is that? Is it about ego? Is it about social connection? Is it about all the information I have in my head that I don't want to let go of quite yet? Et cetera, et cetera. So again, we're talking about it because I think it's so important for us to maybe figure out before we make that decision to retire, like, okay, how am I going to be in relationship with others? How am I going to keep my day busy but not so busy? How do I get out of that wheel without tripping, without falling flat on my face? So what were some of the techniques that you used to help you during that first year where you said mentally it was a hard time, it was a hard transition?
Yeah, I'll backtrack a little bit and suggest that, if your listeners in the previous episode had played a drinking game with the number of times that I said own it, they would be in alcohol-induced comas. And so the first thing I needed to do was to accept the fact that I wasn't owning my retirement from that mental, emotional standpoint. And I did really go full steam into attempting to take better care of myself physically. So I immersed myself into that. And I also had the good fortune that I had a support system that I didn't realize I had in the past. You know, a handful of good friends that were probably kind of impatiently waiting for me to retire, so that, you know, it wasn't, oh, do you want to go on a hike? Do you want to kayak? Do you want to go to a museum? And I'm like, well, you know, Saturday I'm working and Sunday I've got to get ready to work on Monday. So however one can expand their social aspect, and that's a hard one. I'm not suggesting that folks, join clubs that maybe they're not aligned to or anything like that. But from the point of financial planning for retirement, we talk about accumulation while we're planning for it, and then decumulation of our financial means as we're using that money. I would flip it and say that while we might unfortunately decumulate as we're working with our social lives and those people that we connect and love, that we then accumulate in retirement. So I wish I had a formula for it, but it's obviously everybody's, has an individual way of doing it. Again, I had the good fortune to travel a lot, which was something that I would say that if there was something that individuals had passion about, not to clean out, the 400 pair of shoes or, the clothes that you've been holding on to for 20 years because someday you'll fit in them. There's a time and a purpose for that. But to celebrate and to, even if it's not a pro and con, but to sit down and create a mission statement for oneself. If you're starting to think about retirement, think about that mission statement. And then from a financial statement, because I would talk about buckets a lot at work, create that bucket for those things that you don't know are going to happen yet, but you want to be able to say, oh, I can afford it.
Yeah.
Regardless of how small or big it is.
Yeah. One of the things that has come to my awareness is the number of folks in this country who don't have retirement means. At one time, I think most of our parents, grandparents had something called a pension from so many industries. And pension, like social benefits, have really disappeared. I mean, there are these 401ks, these IRAs, but I've been reading that a very significant number of people don't have money put aside.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about how depleting that is, how stressful that is. I was reading a statistic, and I'm going to read this to you now. A 2022 American Psychological Association survey found that a whopping 76% of respondents reported experiencing at least one symptom of stress over the past month. There's a lot of stress going on. And this is, all comers. This isn't necessarily retirement folks, but I was thinking about this combination of this large cohort of folks who don't have money to retire, the number of people who are aging in this country, which is very significant, the number of aging folks who are living below poverty levels, and then this proclivity for us to experience stress on a very regular basis. And how depleting that is of our health. So I guess I'm going to ask you to kind of put on your financial advisor cap for a moment. And, I don't want to get too into how to save or where to put your money, but I guess I would like to stress acknowledge how hard it is for folks in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't recall the statistics specifically, but the dollar amount that households have in savings is frightening. And the fact that folks, before they can even get or save for retirement, that they're living paycheck to paycheck and that they don't have that emergency cash reserve. The point about retiring around 65 is key, because at 65, at least right now, is when folks can get Medicare. So that often is kind of the tilting point for when somebody can retire or not. I paint this kind of, and it was good, a rosy picture of the individuals that I worked with, in saving for retirement, or that they had employer sponsored plans. The world of employer pensions per se is really going away.
Yeah.
But I also worked with folks who I would have to literally say, you can't retire, that there's got to be something out there that you do in order to keep going. That if you want to maintain your current lifestyle, if you want to throw in a trip once a year or once every other year, that as long as, and it was really hard, that as long as your body and your soul and your employer can keep up with that one would have to keep working.
Yeah.
So saving, it becomes a matter of creativity and saving. And again, this isn't advice, but it appears that we might see more folks doing things like reverse mortgages, where they pull the equity out of their homes in order to sustain a particular lifestyle, which can create its own monster years down the road. But that's suggesting that people have a choice to retire. And to your point earlier.
And they have a house.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then there are going to be those folks that are going to be aged out.
Right.
Are going to have physical or mental issues, or need to become caregivers for a spouse or a parent or a child, who are going to have to make some hard decisions.
Yeah.
So, I am a strong believer in working smart, and whatever amount one can save, just to put it away. Because, especially for our younger generations, they might look at, I don't know, $20 and say, what's that going to be 30 years down the road? But that $20 every week, and then maybe you bump it up to 25, and you just get into that rhythm.
Right.
It's better than nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's literally better than nothing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I only hope that we as a country, figure this out, because there's going to be such an abundance of older folks, and we've got to figure out how to take care of them. And so many folks also, part of the challenge is that healthcare is so expensive.
Yeah.
So if you're ill health, retirement can be spent figuring out, how do I just move money from here to there to make sure I stay well. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other side of the coin is I guess someone like me, who just, as long as I'm well, I think I'm just going to continue to do my work, probably less intensely, but continue to do my work until I can't. And can't means, again, I probably physically, or I guess logistically, or I get some other offer to, become a rock and roll star and decide I'm going to change my career. But I do meet folks who also really flourish. And I'm not talking about financially. I'm talking about flourish health-wise, mentally, physically, spiritually, continuing to work too, as long as their work feeds them. And I remember reading, this was some time ago, the New York Times was interviewing a fellow from Japan who I think was living until like his 109th birthday or something. And he was asked, okay, what do you think is the success for your longevity? And he said, work. And I was shocked by it, because it was such the antithesis of the way I had always thought about, retirement is going to, prolong your life because you are not working so hard, or it's easier on the body, or all kinds of reasons. But it really gave me pause, because I realized, oh no, if you have a sense of purpose, a sense of place, a sense of contributing, which is, I think, part of why people volunteer so much in their retirement, because you want to get outside your own head, your own stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything else that is there anything that's really surprised you about this life transition?
Ego.
Ego.
Yeah. Not that it's wounded. And to your point about paraphrasing, self-worth and all, I could have done financial planning and working with individuals forever. I would have loved to continue to do that. But I also feel that the way the industry was going, so this is very, specific to my industry and probably others, I felt a little bit like I was aging out, not what I could give to my clients, but, really what, how I was profiling my client base and what other opportunities were out there. So it wasn't like I, sacrificed a career so that someone else could take it over. I was ready to do it when I finally decided to do it. And so now what I'm doing, and I just had a conversation with one of my sisters a couple of days ago about her switching careers because she said, but I'm so good at what I do. And I said to her, you know what, discover something else that you're good at doing. And so that's kind of, where I'd say I was at right now.
Yeah.
That, the volunteering, the traveling, spending time with friends and family, that they've all replaced that. It's slowly replacing that, that little bit of an ego crush.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I answered your question, but
yeah, you did. I mean,
anyway.
listen, this is a very individual journey. And, when I decided to talk about this with you today, I realized, again, it's such a personal path. It's very different if one is lucky like you to have, put aside enough money and had the option to voluntarily retire versus someone whose job is taken from them or a forced retirement is not a comfortable one. That's a loss of control that most of us would say really eats away at us. And then, of course, the realities of savings, the finances, the cost of living that just keeps going up and up. And then the realities of health and ill health as we age. As I thought about this subject matter, I also tried to dissect, okay, what's the manifestation of just aging versus retirement? And I think it's really hard to dissect them, because they're running parallel for most of us, right? Yeah. So I wanted to bring this to the audience because it is something that so many people are thinking about, wondering about, both grieving the loss of their work and grieving the loss of their inability to leave work. I mean, it's, again, there's strong emotions on both sides. And that my hope for all those listening is that you have choices. And that hopefully, again, our country can provide support systems for all of us, and that continues to evolve and progress. And I don't pretend to know what that looks like. I just know that there's room for change. Of course, I hope that everyone listening finds ways of being as healthy as possible. And one very dear friend of mine who passed at a young age said to me, don't wait until you retire. Don't wait until you're ill to retire.
Absolutely.
And that was really profound too, because as you described, some people, that's how retirement is thrust upon them. And then the rest of their life is spent going to doctor's offices. And I don't wish that for anybody. So it's complex. And I just wanted us to think about it out loud and talk about it out loud and ask everyone listening to just, ask how much of your ego is involved in what you do. How might the loss of your job impact your ego, and how might you replace what you do with another activity, maybe even another job, a path.
A path, a passion. Don't isolate. Isolation, stress in retirement. Don't die in retirement. The isolation and that stress, whether it's because of financial issues or the loneliness, they lead to, and I'm preaching to the choir here, they lead to, incapacitation at times and different forms of dementia, with regard to all those skill sets that they had. And I understand that part of, those illnesses might be genetic or already kind of percolating, but not having some kind of a social life and not integrating with folks can really shorten the beauty of retirement.
Yeah. Well, I've mentioned this many times on Gyno Curious. There's really good science that shows that social isolation just exacerbates illness. Cancer survival, better if you have community. Chronic disease, better if you have community. So this is what you're speaking about. Yeah. Yeah. All righty. Any other thoughts that you want to share with the audience about this transition, ways in which to kind of find the greatest pleasure during this time in their lives, and ways in which to assure, I guess, as much independence, self-sufficiency as possible?
Yeah, get excited about it. Whatever level of excitement that is, whatever small pleasure that there is. Keep an eye on the finances. Obviously, things cost money, but reach out to folks in the same situation. Today in the parking lot at the bank, I was talking to a friend who's 90 years old and still volunteering, and I'm sure she could take me out. But yeah, I would just say that, as corny as it sounds, whether it's a mission statement or some kind of the financial plan, that's set, have that plan, that retirement plan for, things that you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you'd agree with me. Financial planning doesn't stop at retirement. You still, need someone to talk to about how to strategize, how to use your money, and work through all of the, oh my gosh, the quagmire of taxation and all that other stuff. So please continue to see someone who's more expert than you if you need some clarity around that. Yeah, I like to tell the story. I have a 94-year-old friend who's very robust, and she lives in an old home, meaning it was built many, 2 centuries ago, and it's got a very steep set of a staircase. And she says her family keeps telling her, oh, she needs one of those lifts, and maybe she shouldn't live in the house anymore. And she's like, when I get rid of my staircase, I'm going to forget how to climb stairs. So I'm going to keep climbing them. I do it slowly, intentionally, thoughtfully, and I'm going to keep doing it until my body says, can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
It's a story that tells us all about how we just have to continue to be involved and engaged and figure out what gives us pleasure.
Yeah. Yeah. When you stop moving, you stop moving.
Yeah. Yeah. Precisely.
Yeah.
Vicki, thank you so much for joining me again today and sharing your journey.
Thank you.
And I hope that you continue to experiment and have adventures in this time of your life.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you to Jen Hammoud and Maddie Rosenberg, the producers of the show, to David Hoffman, my editor, and to the Epicurean, whose roof under which Radio Free Rhinecliff exists. And to all of you listening, please stay well. Listen to your instincts and intuitions. They are the best of teachers, not to be ignored.